2 seconds here. Sort that out. All right, welcome everybody to the Corporate Services Committee meeting of the Illawarra Shire Council on 10th of December 2024. I'll call this meeting open at 9 a.m. and we'll begin by going through any applications for attending by video link.
Now, Mr. Chair.
Any apologies?
No, Mr. Chair.
Disclosures of interest.
No received so far.
Will there be any public participation today?
None registered.
Without any further ado, we'll move into the business items.
Mr. Chair, I've got another appointment at 9:45, so I'll have to leave during the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll note that. Mr. Phelps, if you could move on with the financial summary investment report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we've just got a report starting at page 3, called point 1.2.1. Overall, I'll go into the summary, the financial summary there at the end of the period called of November 24, but negative variance to budget of 2.98 million compared to a 1.1 million negative noted at the end of the September quarter, which is the last meeting that was held. It's noted that there's not all revenue and costs for the month of November. Obviously, with the short close off in December month, at the December month meeting, it's been cut off probably about 3 or 4 days earlier than anticipated. Summary of the overall variations coming through to make up that $2.98 million. Overall, our operating revenue in an overall perspective is only $114,000 positive for the budget, which is 0.05%. The main contributors behind those items is Government Place Hostel. Our revenue was up by $119,000, which is quite good. Unfortunately, that's been offset by a cost on the other side, which we'll go through shortly. So our personal care subsidies are higher than what we anticipated, so the government providing additional funding coming through for the actual dependency of our residents. So we're doing a lot of our reviews of our residents now and bringing into account their dependency on staff, which gives us that extra funding coming through. Early Learning Centre, higher to about 86,000, receiving some Start Strong for the preschool education, and increasing our childcare subsidies, obviously with the increased utilisation of the facility. Family daycare, it's up by 61,000, purely based on childcare fees coming through, which we give out to the educators coming through. So that's the CCS payments. So it's offset by higher educator payments on the other side. However, it's a little bit higher than what our educator payments are at the moment. Waste management revenue was higher by 200,000, so we've got higher than expected annual resident access charges. We've done our billing at in July, and landfill disposal costs are also fees are also up coming through. One that goes back the other way, so you've got all those ones that are higher. The general revenue is lower by budget by about just over $500,000. Pretty well, it's a timing thing with regards to our financial assistance grants received in advance. We received more in June 24 coming through, and it's been offset in part by a bit higher in our rating coming through and interest received. So that's all offset it slightly. There is a vote coming through with proposed to actually adjust those to the right levels for the votes going forward.
Councillor Fraser.
Through you, Chair. With regard to the rating income, has that situation of the outstanding rates improved, or in the last quarter rates haven't been payable by the 30th of November? Most people. Has this situation improved? And otherwise, what is our outstanding rate of income at this stage? Or the owed rates?
Yeah, at the end of November, our outstanding rates was about 1.2, 1.3 million. And the overdues that appear on our reports are pretty well ones that are due after those installments come through. So it's pretty well in line with what it was at the end of June 24.
Right, so that was about 11.7 million
Correct.
or that or thereabouts. So we've got an additional 1.1 or 1.2 on top of that.
No, that's the actual level of outstandings at this point in time that's overdue.
That's the total amount overdue.
Correct, yeah.
So,
The end of November,
right, so the previous number of 11.7.
that's percent, yeah.
No, my understanding is there was an outstanding balance of 11.7 million.
That's
unpaid rates.
That's government debtors.
No, unpaid rates from.
No, that's incorrect. It was about I'd have to go back now with the June 24 numbers, but that's effectively, the full rating income coming through with installments that happen over the course of the year, I would assume.
I'm talking about, I'll stand to be corrected, but my understanding from the annual statement was that there were outstanding rates of about 11.7 million that hadn't been paid.
No, the 11.7 million was government debtors that are outstanding at the end of June. Of the rates, it was, if you like, $2 million outstanding. I think it was about a 1.3 mark offhand. But I can get that information, take it on notice and provide the
If
information.
you would, because that doesn't accord with my understanding of the numbers.
Mm.
So yes, you can take that on notice.
Okay,
Mr Chair, I think that question's been asked by Councillor McGill for the council meeting next week, so it'll be answered as a question on the notes. Just to put it in perspective, our total rate income's close to about the $11 to $12 million annually, so outstanding rates, I think we just reached the 10% mark at the June reporting period, which is about 11%.
Thank you, Mr Chair. We'll continue that going down through the mix. So town planning revenue was higher than the budget by 72,000. So we had a bit higher section 94 contributions, which has been pleasing. That bit of development happening in the area. White Park revenue was lower by 64,000. So it's lower than what we anticipated. So the events held at the facility. So we're reviewing what our forward plan is in regards to a lot of those events. A lot of those events do happen in the second half of the financial year. So just check our timing of our budget coming through. Aerodrome revenue is lower by 43,000. It's pretty well timing coming through. So a lot of our airport fees are now collected by app data coming through. And we've pretty well got a payment to come in December. But also it's been down slightly. So we'll have to just monitor that as we're coming through. Obviously with the fire season coming into play, if fire bombers are used, that revenue does increase. Because that is charged out as landing fees. Transport for New South Wales state revenue, lower by $90,000. Work requests have significantly increased over the course of October, November. So we should see that revenue stream jumping up. But you will notice there's been an increase in our costs for the Golden Highway coming to the end of November, which is fully recoverable with a slight margin on top of that. Local roads grant revenue is lower by 291, similar to the general purpose revenue. It's lower because of the financial assistance grants coming through. It's been slightly offset by some additional funding we received for the Sedgemoor Aberdeen crossing. So we've got 152,000 for that coming through. Sewer revenue, and it's higher than budget by 389,000. We've had higher access fees coming through. Plus also had some increased activity in our private works area, as well as section 64 contributions and interest received. So it's been a bit buoyant coming through. Water supply revenue was lower by 43,000. Even though we've had higher access charges, again on our budget, it's been offset by lower consumption fees. So obviously that's something we can't drive, and we just have to wait for the weather to make its determination on what happens. Overall, our non-operating revenue and expenditure is lower by about 300,000, which is about 2.25%. Internal fleet hire has remained low at 322,000, stayed roughly about the same for the last quarter, last 2 months. So we're starting to record that. We are continuing to review our fleet charge out rates to make sure that we're recovering as much as we can in regards to our internal fleet hire. Moving into the big item that makes the negative. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, councillor Fraser.
I asked a very similar question to this last month in relation to the non-operating revenue expenditure from internal fleet hire. Is that figure of 322,000, that's not an actual expenditure or a loss? That's an accounting, that's a number that accounts for movement of things from department to department.
Correct.
Internal accounting.
Correct, councillor Fraser, yeah, so it's effectively an internal charge, so that we can charge expenditure to our capital works program and also our maintenance programs.
Yes.
So that's what
So it's not actually. It's a
book item.
Yes. Thank you.
Councillor Shield.
Through you, Chair. Just to clarify for me, if you look at the numbers on pages 4 and 5, we have that, and I assume it's a summary figure, so it says operating revenue up by 114,000. Now, when I went through that list, I got 139,000. Now, that list is it's not detailed, is it? So
It's only the main.
it's only the main points. Yeah. Okay. So,
Yeah, so all the
is it
real-
possible that could be sort of headed up in that fashion so that people with lesser intelligence like me
Yeah.
would just understand that it's not.
Yeah, so we got, that's what we put above the heading there, main contributing factors.
Right.
So we sort of like to say,
Yeah.
these are the main items that we're raising.
Yeah. Okay.
And a lot of the other ins and outs and obviously coming through.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right, now, moving down into the main area here, which is our operating expenditure. So the human resources cost are higher by about 47,000 today. We brought into play a new performance management and recruitment software in the beginning of the year, which was about 85,000. So overall, our costs are down slightly, but we've acquired a new employment and performance management side for our staff. Governance and risk costs are higher by 36, which is predominantly the insurance premium increase for the year, which increased overall in our portfolio probably about just under 10%. So we had to wear that cost on $1 million insurance cost.
Super good. On the software for HR, is that a new direction for council, or is that replacing existing software there?
That is replacing existing software. The other software became we had a bit of limits attached to it. This is a more involved software that will cover the majority of the HR requirements.
Okay, and which part of the requirements are they? Is it a sort of HR specific, whole encompassing piece of software, or is it specific for performance management?
No, it's across the board. So it includes your recruitment as well as performance measurements, also competencies and training as well. So it's an overarching software package, where the other one was, it had limitations in regards to competencies and also attached to the training aspect of the deal as well.
So is this an end of life, or was this a business improvement?
In business improvement from the HR aspect.
Thank you.
Moving down to our infrastructure support costs, they're high by about 31,000. Costs are mainly in regards to admin costs. Obviously, those costs, being 5 months into the year, we start monitoring these costs coming through and making adjustments where necessary to realise those overspends in. Government based hostels high by about $400,000 on our operating costs, so we're up by about 120 in revenue. where we're up by about 400,000 in cost. The cost of the facility, staffing and agency coming through, so there's been extremely a large cost in regards to agency for registered nurses, as well as kitchen managers, as well as PCAs.
Councillor Frey.
Is that situation expected to change? Is that something we have to live with now?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's something that we look at trying to reduce costs. However, that my opinion is it will continue, which is not the most palatable outcome.
That figure of 407,000, that's a year-to-date number.
That's correct, yeah. So overall, when you weigh the two together, we're behind our original budget of about 270,000.
With no likelihood that that's going to improve.
Unless we get additional residents in the facility, I think that's based on probably an average of about 14 residents, 14, maybe 15 with a bit of respite going in out of a 16-bed facility. So we could get additional revenue for minimal cost per se, because of putting your resident in there, the cost of the staffing will remain pretty constant coming through.
But it'll amortise by 116.
Yeah, exactly. So it's quite possible that will happen. The unfortunate situation that we're in with regards to Government Place is that we don't have any resident nurses on the books per se. We've had to use agencies because we haven't been able to obtain or employ resident nurses. The same for the kitchen manager. So we've tried to engage employment of a kitchen manager to look after the facility. Haven't been able to do that due to compliance issues. We need to get a kitchen manager in there to run the facility for residents.
Is there a requirement for the kitchen manager being employed in the Highland Shire Council, or is that something that could be put out for tender?
Overall, we've got it out as agency at the moment. You could do external catering if you wish to do that down the track. I would think that could pay to be a little bit higher, or the same cost of what an agency would be coming through. But you know what's investigating.
Well, it would be preferable if we're going to spend the same amount of money if it was spent with a local provider, in my view. So if it's a net situation, I think it's probably more benefit to retaining with a local provider if that were possible, rather than with a larger, possibly a more national agency.
Yeah, take the point on tap. It's a valid point. But a lot of the overspends there has been our registered nurse. So our registered nurse per week is pretty well going to be $10,000 a week. So if you could get somebody that was on tap that was $3,000 a week, obviously you've got some savings there, but we just haven't had the skill set available to us over in the Merriwell area that has provided that.
Yes.
Councillor Shields.
Just on that same point, my understanding is we've been running at about 14 beds occupancy. Even if we get to full occupancy, it's only another 2 beds, which I'm not sure that's going to solve our situation financially. But I recall from some correspondence that's been floating around, did not the federal minister make some comment about us being able to access some other subsidy? Morris, wasn't there a response from a federal minister along that line? I'm not sure.
Mr. Chair, when we got a response from the federal minister, he brought our attention to a funding source that we're already accessing. So there was no new news, there was no new funding, just simply telling us what we already knew. The other funding that was released last week was the announcement about the 9.5 million for Denman, of course.
Yeah.
We also applied for the same funding source, not to build a new facility as Denman was, or expanded facility, but to bring our current facility up to compliance. So widening doorways so wheelchairs can get through, laundry upgrades, kitchen upgrades, and as I say, not expanding the facility, just bringing it up to compliance. That was only for 1.8. significantly less than 9.5. It's the second time we applied for it, but we're still unsuccessful. So we'll continue to apply for grant funding for those types of works, but it is capital.
Yes,
It's not necessarily, it's not addressing the operational costs, which Mr. Phelps has been talking about.
Yeah.
High skill sets in nursing particularly cost a lot of money, and to get them to an area like Marywall can be very costly in this situation.
Can I just say that maybe we just have to start thinking well and truly outside the box for solutions to this. I don't know, that's a knee-jerk reaction from me. I can't put any real substance to that, but it just seems to me that maybe it's time we really started thinking about some different solutions.
Unfortunately, councillor, in that respect, there's not many solutions, because effectively it's highly regulated industry. And you have to have that expense to maintain that compliance. So unless there's an additional funding stream coming from the government, and the size of our facility just isn't palatable.
Yeah.
Councillor Bryson.
Not wanting to dwell over on government place, but is there, this possibly not, if this isn't a question for you or for the general manager, tell me and I'll save it for another meeting. But realistically, even if government place were expanded to 23 beds, is there the waiting list that would fill those spaces? So if we did get to a point where it had more viability, so I'm saying number 23, but let's say it could be 25. But if in the perfect world and everything aligned, we got money to build more beds and increase the extended facility, is that going to solve? That's not going to. Is that going to solve the problems we face now? Or are they something that are quite independent of the size of the units? And if we did expand it to that size, is there a waiting list to fill the additional beds?
Mr. Chair, so in regard to the first question, we haven't had the demand beyond the 13 or 14 occupancy rate. So even when we've had significant times of vacancies, we've not been successful in getting people to come in. So based on that basis, I would say that we don't have demand to justify going to 25 beds because you'd still be operating at, say, 13 beds. Now, the other question is, why aren't people, is the fact that there's not enough people wanting that facility, or there are people wanting the facility, but the facility doesn't meet their needs? Now, if that's the question, there could be an argument to say you build more beds, but you change the style of the facility to meet the need that's been requested, and that's what potentially Denman's doing, because it surprised me that there's demand for 30 odd new beds at Denman if we can only get 13 at ours. But certainly based on the current demand for the current facility, we're not seeing any more than about 13 or 14 on an annual basis.
Mr. Chair, through you, it does, without indulging in conspiracy theories, is it possible that that's the strategy behind Merton's application successfully to get $9.5 million to expand, that they would then be in a position to attract people from Marywall, given it's only 50 kilometres from one place to the other?
I can't comment, Mr. Chair, on what their business strategy is, but if they expressed an interest when we go out for our EOI, I'm more than welcome to discuss with them the operation of both facilities.
Space, so I'm going to make a comment. What a time to be a registered nurse. My mother spent a career as a registered nurse in nursing homes and was paid very little for a job. And, you know, for all the negatives that are happening here, the one positive here is that sector who have worked so hard all of their life for a job that is so meaningful for end of life people and so challenging that they finally get rewarded to the extent that they should.
Thank you, Chair, for those comments. So moving down after Government Place, so we'll go on to the early learning and family daycare costs. They're higher by about 125,000, which is pretty well offsetting the nearly 150,000 in extra revenue so on the other side. So we're a little bit in front of overall in regards to that facility, those facilities and services. Economic promotion is higher by about 191,000. You'll note our votes coming through that we've got a couple of votes coming through for 100,000 and 150,000. Pretty well the overspends there is on the Open Street Tourism Project, which we received 150,000 funding for, which has been fully grant funded. And also our finalisation of our branding project for the region coming through, which effectively 100,000 will come from the Muswell Shire Council. So that'll be invoiced out to those guys. Sale yards costs are higher by about 115,000. So we've had some additional costs in operations, plus higher truck wash charges coming through. We're going through and monitoring that operation at this point in time, just to see where those costs are and whether or not they'll be a continuum coming through for the rest of the year.
Just through you, Mr. Chair. Wayne, it seems funny if the truck wash water's higher, your income would be higher.
Correct, and that's what we're going through and monitoring. And we're going through and having a look and seeing why that truck wash cost isn't higher. Whether or not there was a change in the water rates going through, whether or not we're utilising water through our tanks for the truck wash facility that we have on tap up the Sale House facility, or whether or not we're paying for water from the tap.
Through you, Chair, the costs being higher by the budget than 115,000, and I'm assuming that the budget starts from a position where there's a deficit with costs in any event. What's the net figure? What's the net loss? What's the net negative for the cost of sale yards today?
Today, I'd have to have that on
Or
page.
year to date?
Yeah, year to date. Effectively, you're looking at just off the top of my head, probably about 300,000 today coming through. That's counting two loan payments included in that number. I'll give you a more definitive number if you like. That's fine.
If you're confident enough in that number, that's satisfactory.
Okay. Moving down into the tourism and Hunter Warbirds costs. So reduction there in our costs overall in regards to the facility as well as the tourism aspect. So we've had reduction in our staffing hours, obviously at the facility, the Hunter Warbirds facility, which has saved a bit on our in our cost area. And also we've had a vacancy for the tourism events coordinators role that has been vacant probably for the last 4 months. So that's been a bit of a saving there. So it's now been filled. It was filled in the last month. So for that lady in training. Waste operations expenditure is lower by about 165,000. A lot of it is timing coming through from getting contractors to provide invoices coming in for the curbside collection, as well as our state levies that we're paying. Building control costs for town planning costs are lower by about 78,000. So it's just had some vacancies in that area. And also it's reduction in our consultants costs. So it's just been more of a timing thing coming through with our employment costs coming into building and town planning. Quarry costs are higher by about 286,000. It's pretty well a one-off cost that comes through in regards to our crushing and screening at the Elliston pit. So we obtained a lot of material out there to undertake a lot of the capital works along Barrington Forest and Hunter Road. So that material is now available to use on those projects. So obviously that'll be picked up through revenue on the other side from those projects. Parks and gardens costs are higher by about 76,000. So we've had some increased costs in regards to some of our tree maintenance and also training that's jumped up out of the ground, which had a discussion about it internally and monitoring the training costs coming in to the mix. Our servicing is down by about nearly $30,000 overall, so that's an offsetter against tree maintenance, which is it's a timing thing. We don't know whether we're going to have to go out and cut down a tree or prune trees that have had storm damage. So it's a timing thing. So overall, we monitor those costs to the end of the financial year. Sporting grounds is similar. So its servicing costs are up by about $86,000 at this point in time. Obviously, we'll be monitoring those costs coming through. So it becomes a situation now where we start monitoring these costs and bringing those costs back into alignment, or finding out why these costs are actually blowing out a little bit and rectifying accordingly. Bridge maintenance costs are down by $58,000, so it's just a reduction in our maintenance required on bridges, obviously with our replacement bridges happening last year. So that's that trend could possibly happen to the end of the year, and we have a bit of a saving on the other side. Local roads, admin and training costs are high by about $223,000. We've looked seriously in regards to these costs, because it's mainly in relation to salaries and training for outdoor staff. So obviously, as I said earlier, the training costs have been a huge focus for us, but also with the salaries, a couple of our high-level engineers have been costing all their time to the admin area, where they should be costed out to the jobs. So we're going through reviewing what they've been up to, and then we're costing those across to capital works jobs and maintenance programs. Regional local roads maintenance is higher by about $445,000, mainly in regards to the regional network. The regional network's up by about $400,000. It includes a lot of heavy patching that we've undertaken, which we have a capital hole for that actual expenditure, and that'll come across. So that's preparing our road network for reseals coming forward.
So the regional aspect of that's something that will be recoverable from other parties through funding or through grants?
The regional side of it is mainly in regards to block grants, which we get grant funding from, but it's only a set number. So we always get that set number coming through. The overspends that we've got there, if we take the heavy patching out, there could be overspends in the regional road by maybe $200,000. We'll have to monitor that now until the end of the year and reduce our servicing requirements.
But that's something that we have to worry.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can you just very quickly, if it's possible, define regional and local roads? What's the difference there, or is there a simple definition? If not,
Mr. Chair, through you, we've got 3 road classifications in New South Wales: state roads, regional roads, local roads. State roads are things like New England Highway and Golden Highway. They're owned by the state government and generally fully funded by the state government. Regional roads are the in-between roads. So I'll start with the local roads. They're the bottom end of the local streets, local roads that are just fully owned by council and maintained by council. And then between those two, you have the regional roads. They're effectively council roads because they are our ownership, but the state government recognises the regional importance they play and recognises that a lot of transport on the roads is not local traffic generated within the local government area, and is travelling from one local government area to another, and therefore they make a contribution to the council for that extra wear and tear and impact that it plays, and I guess the significance it plays in their general state road network. So we get a block grant. That block grant is a fixed amount. It's calculated based on the length of the road, number of bridges you've got, population size. So there's a whole heap of factors going into that. But as Mr. Phelps pointed out, throughout the year, if we spend more on the regional road network, we have to pull that in before the end of the financial year because we don't get any extra money. The opposite side of that is when we do work on the Golden Highway, which is a state road, the more work we do, the more money the state government gives us to do. So that's a good outcome. They just keep asking us to do more work. They direct us. We do the work. We get paid. Regional road, we have to manage the budget.
Thank you. Yeah. Moving down now into our flood damage works, it's lower by just over $500,000. So our main focus has been on our capital works plus also our maintenance program. So obviously that's in the first half of the year. Second half of the year we'll start looking more seriously in regards to our flood damage, which is fully grant funded. So we'll be pushing that along the second half of the year. It does play a factor in regards to our maintenance programs as well. So it's like a part of our pseudo maintenance program. The state roads, as I mentioned earlier, it's higher than budget coming through by nearly 290,000. We've had that increased request coming through, so we've paid some additional costs, which we'll recover now through from the state government, as the GM just alluded to. Sewer admin, mains and treatment activities is high by about nearly just over $500,000. We've gone through and reviewed the costs in regards to that, seeing how it's jumped out of the ground. There's a number of items that are included in there that are capital in nature, which we'll go through and make the adjustments for. Some of those, even though they'll be regarded as maintenance overall, when we look at the end of year financials, we do have a capital budget for them, and that's effectively desludging of the sewer ponds at the Scone treatment plant. So we'll be looking at that and bringing that into account in the future reports coming through. So we'll be monitoring that. Our water supply costs are higher than budget by 189,000. We've had a couple of late costs come in from the state government who wanted to charge us for use of water from the Hunter River. So we've had some additional costs attached to that. Plus also we've had to do some major rework on our reservoirs. So that's also pushed up the costs. If you have a question, Councillor Fraser, you're on the button.
Yes, I was just going to comment about the, just a very quick question about the overlap between capital and the operational side of the sewer. So I think things like renewal of sewer mains, there's probably an overlap there between the operational and the capital side. Would probably be, when you do the final accounting, probably be more properly contributed to capital expenditure rather than operation.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
So I think you answered that when you went on with your explanation, hence why I turned the light out.
No, that's fine. Thanks, Councillor Fraser. Yeah, so it's very defined. We try to identify all our works that we think are separate to just normal run-of-the-mill maintenance as a separate capital item in our budgets when we move forward. But come accounting time, obviously we'll adjust accordingly. So that were the main contributors behind the overspend of the $2 million coming through. So there's a few challenges in there, obviously, as we come through the mix. But we'll be monitoring a lot of those costs coming through and making adjustments as and when required. Moving into our capital works area, it's higher than budget by about just under $800,000. Again, we've got a number of contributors to this overspend. The first one is the Bendigo Street pedestrian crossing, which is 83,000. We do have some money set aside for those works. So it's a project that was carried over from last financial year. So we'll be doing it coming forward probably in the December period. Our Waterloo dog area, we acquired some land down underneath the bypass effectively, so we can undertake those works. So we're looking at trying to fund that coming through. White Park Complex internal roads, a lot of the roads in the facility were very badly damaged from a lot of the wet weather and so forth. So we've gone down and reconstructed a lot of those roads so that they can withstand future weather events. So we've undertaken that. So hopefully that will generate some more patrons through the facility. Our White Park Complex electrical supply, this is a fully grant funded project. It's a carryover from the 23-24 year. We'll take up the grant funding on the other side of that overspend when we do some further votes. Coulson's Creek Road, lower by just under 300,000. It's continuing on schedule, on budget, with its likely completion being July, September 25. So that's moving on quite well. Regional and local roads culvert flood betterment program. This is a fully grant funded program, so we'll bring into account the grant funding for that, and we'll bring that in the December report. Moonam Brook Road lower by about 489,000. Delaying the works coming through, and the works remain on budget coming into the mix, and we now finish those works, so that's quite pleasing. So it's been finalised. The Aberdeen Public School upgrade works is higher than budget by about 179. Transport for New South Wales identified that the crossing required further enhancement across from the school. They provided some grant funding, which was about 152,000. So council will have to wear the balance of that, which is about $27,000. So that will come from other sources within the budget. The CBD works is lower by about 100,000. The project's continuing, is now effectively open to traffic in the December period, which is quite good. And now we'll be looking at seeing whether we can extend that further down the track in the next 6 months to finalise the project completely. Government and Sully Lanes over at Merriwar, the projects have commenced earlier than anticipated, so it's predominantly a timing issue coming through for the 117. Mains renewal underneath our water fund, it's lower than budget by 123. So again, answering your question, Councillor Fraser, some of those costs that we had in there, mains renewal in our operation, should come into this area here. Reservoir cleaning is higher by
Through you, Mr. Chair, is that mains renewal, is that the work that's going on around Aberdeen at the moment?
yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Thank you.
Reservoir cleaning, we identified that a number of the reservoirs needed cleaning, we've done some maintenance works on them, so we've undertaken the cleaning activities on those reservoirs, and that's pretty well a project that we undertake every 10 years, so it's just as and when needed. So we've undertaken that work, so that should be put there now for another 10 years. Aberdeen lift pump, it's higher by 48, so we require some emergency works in regards to the pump out of the water supply. The Glenbourne pipeline pump replacement is part of an overall project of about $500,000. So the initial works was completed earlier than anticipated. The sewer treatment plant renewals higher by 126,000. So we've had some unexpected works there. So we've completed those works. A lot of these are very reactive works that come through and then become an emergency. So we have to undertake those works. They're totally funded by the sewer and water funds that do come through. So they don't affect the general fund per se. And the sewer main renewals, it's lower by 49,000. So it's only minimal works happening today. And obviously, as we discussed earlier, some of those works are included in our operational area, so we'll move those into that area. So overall, when you add all the numbers up, it comes about $2.98 million negative to budget at this point in time. Moving into our position, effectively we've made no movement to our overall budget position, so it still sits at the pretty well balanced budget. We have attached some proposed votes in the report. Just to give you a feeling for what those votes are, and they're the ones that are very high level, that like financial assistance grants and some grant funding that we've been able to secure for some branding projects and so forth. So we can go through those in more detail as we get to them. During the December month, as we go through and do our reviews and see where we're sitting from a point of view of end of year budget, we'll be going through the process and doing a number of other votes and bringing into account any grant funding that we've been able to secure for projects, and also if there's some projects that will be deferred after discussions with a lot of the budget holders over the course of the next couple of weeks. Our bank funds and investment report, total funds held is about 39 million. Of which we've included reports and schedules for the October and November periods. Obviously, with September, we've had a couple of months after that date, so we included both of those. So in those portfolios, in October we maintained 45 million, and then in November it was 38 million coming through. Obviously, there's been a big jump from the September period. That was because we secured the milestone payment for Main Road 358, which was $16 million, and that happened right at the end of October. Of that, we went ahead and paid some of the creditors for Main Road 358, and then invested $12 million back into the mix to be spread over the course of where we anticipate the funding to come, the expenditure to come through in our invoicing from Darracom. So we've got some schedules in there to identify that. Our external loans at the end of November is 28.74 million and continues to come down by 100 to a couple $100,000 each month. Internal loans, we continue along. We've got that internal repayment of 2.5 as discussed at our September meeting. Another payment is due, or another transfer is due at the end of December. Restricted asset schedule, we reincorporated the restricted asset schedule coming through. That restricted assets, I've given you sort of a definition there of what external and internal is. And we forecast that out to the end of the 30 June 25 period. It's too difficult to forecast that on a month basis because of the timing of a lot of our costs of revenue and expenditure. Capital works expenditure, the end of November, we've increased our capital works slightly, obviously with a couple of our votes coming through. But as I mentioned, we'll be going through doing an overall review to the end of December. There will be some deferrals of projects that will come out of that $71 million. So obviously we'll be looking at those, and that could be, and we'll have reasons why they are deferred coming through, and highlighting those to the committee in the January meeting. Based on the year-to-date spend today, we've spent 21.4 million to the end of, that should say November, not September. It's a bit of a typographical error there, which is just under 30% of our overall budget. Overall, to date, 41.6%. So we're a little bit behind on our overall picture, but we've got a lot of our projects that are back-ended into next year. Obviously, there's a lot of chunky payments coming for Main Road 358, which will bring up that spend coming into the mix.
It's really going to get checked. A little bit behind overall. That really needs to be understood.
Based on the fact of where the actual timing of November in the 12-month period to where we actually.
But please don't think that I'm being negative.
Yeah.
So I'm all for understanding.
Yeah.
So the fact that there's understanding is that. I just want to make that clear that you are actually under budget at this stage.
The problem with budgets are that next year
it will pick up.
It'll pick up. Yeah.
But at this stage, you're under.
Yeah, not technically. sorry, Council President. If we look at our budgets as they sit and what we actually spend, we're actually overspent by nearly $800,000. So it's a timing thing coming through. Our second half of the year will probably account for 60% of our overall budget. The 41.6 is only just a 5/12 of the year.
Yeah.
Probably a bad analogy, I suppose, the 41.6%, given that.
Yeah.
So effectively included in our schedules there. So if we move on to page 13, we've just got a high-level summary of our fund and function area. So as you can see, the votes going through, there's a few votes happening there in the request votes, which is what we have in our schedules. And overall, they come back to a nil effect on the bottom line in the mix. Moving then on to our bank reconciliation and our graph of our cash and investments. On page 17, as you can see, there's major spikes there, obviously, with the big milestone payments that hit the bank account as they come through, especially for 358. And then spend on the other side where we have to spend to pay for the creditors coming through. Moving into our investment schedules, here we've changed the annual yield part for there and only just put in the investment yield. It's more realistic yield that we do obtain from those investments. So that's what the yield will be from our actual physical investments that we have there. So ones that the other yield that we had in there was for like 12 months for an investment we had for 6 months type thing, which was doubling the actual interest component. So this is more or less just giving you the investment yield per se. Of the October one, you will note that the Westpac management account was more than 25% of our overall amount of investments, which is what was recommended in the policy. The reason for that is we got 16 million right at the end of October, and we didn't have a chance to put it in investments. So we then spread it across, as you see in November, across all the investment houses coming through. So we've spread that money and achieved some relatively good rates. We've effectively the 1.4% one for the National Trade Bank, that has now dropped off. So that's now all come back into good rates of about high 4s and 5s.
Of that $16 million of the milestone payment, all of that I assume is accounted for in the outgoings on the project.
Yeah. So effectively the 16 million, that was to pay the progress payments from Main 358. And then we put $12 million into investments.
So the 12 million that's gone into investments will come out again to pay the creditors, so it's a temporary number.
Yeah. So effectively the even though transport don't like to say this, we put that money aside so that we can get a bit of interest on it and benefits.
Understood that it just means that the net number of 45,331,000 and change is closer to probably something like 28 million.
Correct. Yeah. So it's just an investment schedule up and down. Yeah. Moving then into our loan schedule, that just gives you the highlight of where the loans sit overall at the end of November. That's on page 20. Then we have the restricted assets report, which is just the more or less your external, which is the legislative amounts. And then it reverts back to internals below that coming through. Now, you'll note in there that we've got a couple of negatives attached to the internals, which is effectively sale yards and also the land development costs, and also government place. So there's negatives attached to those items. Haven't attached anything in regards to the Hunter Warbirds or any of those losses that we're sustaining. It's always been envisaged that the sale yard would turn around at some point in time. I'm still sitting in optimism, Councillor Fraser, but overall, it's one of those ones that we've maintained that thought pattern ever since the sale yard's operations.
Hope is a cardinal virtue. However, it comes to time where reality, I think, has to bite.
Yeah.
I think realistically, we have to get to the position where we accept that the sale yards in its present form is a loss-making proposition.
Yeah. Overall, yes, and we've effectively accepted that in our budgets that we do put out to the community now. Previously, they were going into an RA as an offset up, but now we actually show them on the bottom line. So this is how much it's losing. This is how much it's losing. So it's totally transparent from a point of view of that. It's more of just to show this is how much money that we're owed by the sale.
Yes.
So as you can see, by the end of the year, the $37 million overall in our forecasted restricted assets balances. Obviously, as votes come in and out, as the year gets closer to the end of the financial year, that number will change up and down, but that's our forecast at this point in time. Then we move into our capital works expenditure summary. Just gives you the high level view of where we sit with a lot of our projects, and it just gives a more or less a summary page, so you can see them individually as they stand coming through the mix. And the final schedule there, which is our votes side of things. So it's on page 35. So here we identify items that haven't been included in the budget when we initially brought it down. And it mainly relates to some grant funding that we've been able to secure for the Open Streets initiative, the contribution from Muswell Council for that regional branding. Then a couple of adjustments there for the financial assistance grants that were in advance that we need to make, bring back to reality of exactly where it sits at this point in time. And the final ones there, we've got the grant funding for the Jefferson Park Master Plan. That was just a balance up of that grant funding coming through. And then I've got another typographical error. There's not bus shelters, it's actually Moon End Brook Road. That 520,000 is additional grant funding that we received for Moon End Brook Road coming through, that covers the cost of it in the mix. So overall, there's just to give you a feel of what votes are coming. There'll be a lot more in December, obviously, once we go through and do a full review of the budget and see where a lot of our capital work programs are actually sitting at this point in time from the infrastructure guys. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Phelps. Is everybody happy with the report there? And if so, are we happy to vote on it as a block? Really, for me, it's only the number 7. If we've got any issues with any of the proposed budget variations that would need to do anything other than vote as a block.
The proposed budget variations, it's a net zero impact.
Yeah.
Correct. It's just
Correct, yes. Councillor Brayden.
for you on quite happy to vote on the following block.
Yeah, I have to.
So if I got a mover, please, for the recommendation. Moved Councillor Stiles, seconded Councillor Fraser. All those in favour?
Aye.
You guys have it. That's Councillor Fraser, Councillor Shields, Councillor Stiles, Councillor Williamson. We'll move on now to the property update, please, Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a lot of change since last month. We've still got 36 properties leased. Probably the two big changes to the report is an update on Hill Street. We have now exchanged contracts on that first property. Good news is we exceeded the sale expectation, and I'll provide that figure back to councillors confidentially. And we'll now move on to 98 Hill Street, which is the next property to be sold. The other big mover is we floated the idea of exploring the Rosedale estate at Murrurundi at the last meeting, and council has said, basically do a bit more exploration in that, and we'll test that with the community. And we've had a bit of feedback from the community in which parts of the estate area are being used and which ones aren't, and a council inspection last week, I think it was, last Tuesday. We got a bit of a feel for what areas could be potentially developed and which areas would be potentially left for community use moving forward. So we're getting a bit of a feel for that. We'll be able to report back into the new year on that one. But happy to take any questions on any of the other projects.
I think that has been discussed, but good news that we've shifted that property, Hill Street. Will the funds from that be placed into restricted accounts, or how we're going to manage revenue?
Look, at this stage, I think, at least in a briefing, we discussed that we would not use those funds for anything other than further property development, and that would be the intent. So I think Mr. Phelps has got financial instruments in place to try and make that happen.
Through Mr. Chair, that's correct.
Yeah. So will that be a new line item, or have you got an existing line item that you'll stash that under?
We can separate it, but we do have a property disposal area. However, I think in regards to the White Park itself, and being attached to White Park, that land, we might just need to look at how we actually classify it coming through.
Yeah, technically it wasn't part of the White Park development space, so we can bring some information back to the councillors about how you wish to treat that. But I think certainly restricting it for future land development was the intent that was originally put forward.
I think that was posed by the members of the ARAC yesterday, that we look after those funds, and so I think that's a sensible move, that we keep that all there and not brittle that away in operational issues. But has anybody else got any questions, comments? We're going to vote. Have I got somebody to note the recommendation? I'll move that. Move councillor Williamson, second councillor Shields, all those in favour? The ayes have it. We'll move on now to the grants report, please. General Manager.
Mr. Chair, obviously, the absence of other staff, I'll take any questions on this. This came about from a question from councillor Fraser in November to council, and as part of the response to council, we said we'd provide it as a standard report to the Corporate Services Committee. We'll continue to provide this as updates, and happy to take any questions.
One question.
Yeah.
I noted there was a grant for the Hayden Street Liverpool Terrace Pathway in Murrurundi. Is that in response to something the community asked for, or is that just there was available funding?
There was a Murrurundi CAC meeting, possibly in the last 12, it may have been even 18 months ago, where they were looking at doing a footpath that effectively provided a circuit around the township of Murrurundi. So when this funding came up, it was in line with that CAC initiative, and the intent is to go from Morella Street along the riverbank. I'm just trying to think of the next street immediately to the east of Morella Street, but it'll connect up with that. So that was the intent of that footpath, to at least commence that circular circuit around the township.
Any further questions, comments? Just to add to that, interesting question, councillor Fraser, and thank you for your initiative in bringing this to the committee. This is a very valuable piece of information. Just on pathway, that particular piece of pathway there did commit a 25% payment for the resident running past there, as it was a side street. And that may be something the councillors wish to look at in the future when that policy comes about. Yeah, it's an interesting one, and one when we have to decide as a group whether the finances of the organisation and the finances of the residents align there for the benefit of both. But there being no further questions or comments, I'll ask for a mover for the notation of the grants report, please.
I'll move that.
Move councillor. I'm going to give councillor Fraser. We just got to the thing as it's his initiative, and seconded councillor Shields. All those in favour?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you, Karen. The last report today is a request for donations. The General Manager, you might run us through the two.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Mr. Chair, there's been two this month. They're detailed in the attachments. Both have been given permission for, I think it was $400 maximum for both. Yeah, that's correct. So, yeah, happy to take any questions on those.
Any further questions, comments, councillors? We've got a mover. Move councillor Stoll, seconded councillor Shields. All those in favour? I think the ayes have it. That being the end of the business paper, have we got any further questions or comments, general business before we close the meeting?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I've spent a significant part of the last week reading this extraordinarily interesting document from the Legislative Council Standing Committee on the ability of local governments to fund infrastructure and services. And I did mention this briefly to you yesterday, the mystery of depreciation, which seems to be, well, it gets a fair bit of attention in this report. And yesterday, because it's there, I went out to the Dartbrook Bridge, and according to the sign there, it was a project cost of $2,063,596. I'd just like an explanation as to the depreciation that is going to be charged on that, and how, well, the report says it's a non-cash movement, and yet it seems to be something that binds councils when we don't actually spend any money. So can I get some sort of a response on what depreciation is all about?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I'll take that one. Depreciation is effectively the write down on the effective useful life of the asset per se. Bridges, 100 years. That's pretty well what the ratio is for concrete bridges, which is what Dartbrook is. So you can do the maths on that. So it's got to be like,
So it's 1% a year.
So 20 grand a year that's come through. Now the depreciation side of things, the way the government look at it is, and they look at with a lot of their ratios that come through, is the write down depreciation on your assets should come back to you of those assets, because you're maintaining the pace of those write downs of your asset base up with renewals that you're putting back into play. So that's the myth behind the depreciation, is that they use it as an effective write down or effective reduction in the useful life of your assets, which you renew on a constant basis every year to bring it back into parity. Yeah. You understand?
So if I think I've just heard you correctly, if there's $20,000 of depreciation on that bridge, are you telling me that we should be spending $20,000 a year maintaining something?
I think
Yeah. So effectively, that's the lifespan. Now 100 years with accounting standards, it's straight line. So the audit office has been on the straight line. Reality is consumption. So a concrete bridge that you build on first year doesn't really depreciate. It has the same useful life, and with a bridge per se, it doesn't really loses its useful life until about 90 years. It's when it starts falling apart, and then that's when you renew it and take up the asset. So overall, it's a big washing machine that we renew a lot of our assets over the course of the year. That we may spend $10 million in renewals on our assets across the board, and our depreciation across the board might be $10 million, that we've maintained the same level of asset renewals as what the government requires us to do. That's best practice. Now, with a lot of the depreciation on assets, because the audit office has gone through and said you're going to increase your asset base by indexation every year, that asset base just continues to keep growing and growing and growing. And you're going to get to a point where if we've got $15 million worth of depreciation, we may not have enough funds to actually do $15 million in renewals as well as additional new works. So we may fall below that best practice benchmark coming forward, but that's playing with numbers effectively. It's a very difficult one, and in the long-term projections going forward, our renewals going forward, until you look at it within a period of maybe 1 or 2 years out from doing the works, it's gonna fall down to like 60-70%, because you just cannot fund your depreciation charge.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, councillor Shieldy. Thank you for the explanation. All things being equal, I'll call this meeting closed at 10:10. Thank you, staff. Thank you, councillors. May you have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas all.